The cries in the street. The colony market was loud. Bright lights flashed from vendor stalls. Traders shouted in many languages. Aliens of all shapes and colors moved fast, buying, selling, walking, pushing. But no one looked at her. The alien, mother sat on the cold ground holding her small child close. Her skin was pale blue, covered in dust. Her clothes were torn and thin. Her arms trembled as she hugged the child tighter, trying to keep him warm. The boy, no older than 3, was barely breathing. His small chest moved weakly. His eyes were half open, his lips dry. He was sick, very sick. Please, help, the mother whispered in her own language. Her voice cracked. She didn't care if they understood. She only wanted someone to stop. But no one did. People passed by. Some frowned. Others turned their heads quickly. A few laughed. One alien vendor kicked dirt at her and shouted something cruel in a harsh voice. The mother bowed her head. She didn't cry. She had no tears left. The wind picked up. It was cold. A storm was coming. Her body shivered, but she wrapped her thin shawl around the boy. She whispered in his ear, "Hold on, my love. I'm here." Then her voice grew louder. This time she screamed, "Help my child, please, please." Still, no one stopped until one man heard. He wasn't tall. He wasn't wearing armor. He didn't carry weapons, just a worn-out coat, old boots, and tired eyes. A human. He stood near a food stall holding a hot drink in one hand. He turned. He saw her, and he walked toward her. People stared. A vendor grabbed his sleeve. "Don't," the alien warned. "They're trash. Dangerous. Cursed." The human shook his head slowly. "No child deserves this," he said. He knelt down next to the alien mother. Her eyes widened. She held her son tighter, afraid he might be taken. "I won't hurt you," the man said softly. "I just want to help." She didn't answer. She didn't speak his language, but she looked into his eyes, and something in them made her pause. They were kind, steady, human. The man opened a pouch and took out a small water bottle. He gently offered it. The woman stared at it like it was gold. Her hands trembled as she reached out, took it, and helped her son drink. Just a few drops. The boy coughed, but he swallowed. His eyes blinked. The man gave her a small cloth, too. "He's burning up," he said. He touched the boy's forehead. "Fever. Too long in the cold." The mother bowed her head, placing her hand over her heart. A silent thank you, then the man stood up. "Come with me," he said. She didn't understand. She looked up, confused. So he pointed to himself, then pointed away, toward a narrow alley. "Safe," he said slowly, then pointed to her and her son. "You. Me. Safe." She hesitated. Then with great effort she stood up, still holding her boy in both arms. Her legs were weak. Her back ached. But she followed. They walked through the market, now silent. Eyes followed them. Whispers floated through the cold air. Why is the human helping her? Maybe he's one of them. Disgusting. He'll get sick too. But the man didn't care. He led them behind the market, through metal doors, down old stairs, into a small underground room. A storage space, once forgotten. It had a mattress, a heater, a water filter, and a small lamp. The woman looked around, unsure. The man pulled out a pack of dry food and warm soup. He heated it quickly and gave it to her. Her hands shook again. She didn't eat right away. She fed her child first, slowly, carefully. The boy took in the warm soup with little sips. His breathing calmed. His body relaxed just a little. The man gave her a blanket. She wrapped it around her child, then looked up at the human again. For the first time. Her eyes held hope. She tried to speak. Her words were strange. Sarah. To. He smiled gently. "It's okay. Rest now. You're safe here." She didn't understand the words, but she understood his tone. His voice was like warm light. She sat on the mattress, curled around her child, and watched as the human sat nearby, keeping the heater close. And for the first night in many nights, the alien mother didn't sleep in fear. Outside, the cold wind howled through the streets. But inside, in the quiet of that small hidden room, a brave human had changed everything, with one simple act of kindness. Ethan sat by the heater, watching the alien mother and her child. The boy had fallen asleep, his small body wrapped in the warm blanket. His fever wasn't gone, but it was better. The mother hadn't slept yet. She kept her arms around her son, eyes half closed but alert. Every noise from outside made her flinch. Every time Ethan moved, she tensed. Her body didn't trust safety. Maybe it had never known it. Ethan didn't try to speak. He just sat there. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story. But he knew pain when he saw it. He had seen too much pain during his time on this colony. This place was supposed to be a home for all. That's what the government said. Unity across species. But the truth was different. Humans lived in one part of the colony. The aliens lived in the poorer parts, far away from the hospitals, the good jobs, the warm homes, and those like this mother, fugitives, exiles, unregistered. They had no rights at all. Ethan remembered when he was a soldier. He had left war behind to live in peace. He had built this little shelter underground for himself, but now he wasn't alone. The woman suddenly spoke. Her voice was soft, broken. "Zira," she said, tapping her chest. "Zira." Ethan blinked, then nodded. "Zira? Your name?" She nodded. He pointed at himself. "Ethan." She tried to repeat it. Tan? Close enough." Then she pointed to her child. "Loki." Ethan smiled a little. "Loki." He looked at the sleeping boy. He's strong like his mother. Zira didn't understand the words, but she understood the smile. And slowly, very slowly, her shoulders relaxed. Ethan stood up and walked to a small metal box. He opened it and pulled out medicine packets. They were old but still usable. He knelt beside the boy and showed Zira the medicine. "For fever," he said. She watched carefully, eyes wide, but nodded. Ethan gave the child a tiny amount, then looked at Zira again. "He'll need rest, food, and we need to keep him warm." Zira tilted her head. She didn't understand, but she trusted the tone. The heater hummed softly. Then a sharp knock came from above. Ethan froze. Zira pulled her son close again, her body trembling. Voices outside, rough ones, guards. "Open up, routine search." Ethan cursed under his breath. "Not now." He turned to Zira. "Hide," he whispered. He pointed to the far corner, behind stacked metal boxes. Zira moved fast. She crawled into the corner, with her child wrapping themselves in the blanket, hiding like shadows. Ethan walked up the stairs and opened the upper door. 2 colony guards stood there, tall, armed, alien faces twisted in suspicion. "You live here?" one asked. Ethan nodded. "Reports of unregistered movement. You see anything unusual?" Ethan shook his head. "Just the usual noise and trash." One guard sniffed the air. "Smells like something alien." Ethan laughed. "Yeah, I had stew. Extra spice." The guards didn't smile. They pushed past him and looked around the small top floor. There was nothing to find. "Stay inside," one guard said. "Dangerous things out there." They left. Ethan waited until the sound of boots faded. Then he rushed back downstairs. Zira was still in the corner, holding her son tight. Her eyes were wide with terror. Ethan dropped to his knees. "They're gone. You're okay." Zira looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something she hadn't done since she arrived. She reached out and touched his hand. A silent, "Thank you." Later that night, Ethan sat outside the small room, thinking. He had a choice. He could send her away in the morning, let her disappear into the dark streets again, forget it ever happened. That would be the safe thing. Or he could help her, truly help her, feed her, protect her, risk everything. But why? She wasn't human, she wasn't his friend. She had nothing to give him. But deep inside, Ethan remembered a child he had once tried to save during a war. He failed back then. Maybe this time, he wouldn't. He stood up, went back in, and looked at Zira. "I'm not sending you back out. There," he said quietly. "You stay. Both of you, as long as you need." Zira didn't understand his words, but she saw his eyes, and she believed him. For the first time in a long time, someone had chosen her, not to use, not to punish, not to sell but to save. The room was warm now, but the silence was cold. Ethan had done everything he could, fed the child, cleaned the cuts on Zira's arms, and even set up a second heater near their sleeping spot. Still, she barely spoke. She kept her eyes low, her back straight, and her arms always wrapped tightly around her son. It had been 2 days since she entered Ethan's hidden shelter. The boy, Loki, was slowly healing. His fever had dropped, and he had even smiled once, just a tiny smile, when Ethan gave him a glowing toy ball. But Zira never smiled, not once. Ethan watched her carefully. He noticed how she checked every corner of the room, every exit, every sound. Even in her sleep, she would wake at the smallest noise. Her hands would reach for her son as if someone might take him. What was she running from? Ethan didn't ask. Instead, he waited. He offered her food, soft blankets, and quiet company. Sometimes he spoke to her in his language, even if she didn't understand. He just wanted her to know she wasn't alone anymore. But Zira held her silence like a shield. Until one night, something changed. It was very late. Loki had finally fallen into deep sleep. The heater hummed gently. Ethan was writing in his old journal when he heard a sound, a whisper. He looked up. Zira was sitting beside the heater. Her face was pale. Her eyes were far away. "I was a healer," she said in broken English. Ethan froze. It was the first full sentence she had spoken. She didn't look at him. Her eyes stared into the heat's glow. "I help many people in my world, but I fail one." Her voice shook. "My sister, she died because of me." Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened. Zira kept speaking slowly. "She, Mary Noble, very powerful. He, cruel. Hurt her. I try to protect. I speak out." She closed her eyes tightly. "They punish me, take my name, say I was liar." Ethan's breath caught. That's why she was hunted. Not because she did wrong, but because she told the truth. Zira looked at Loki. Her voice cracked. "They take my first child. I never see again. Then they come for this one. I run." Ethan felt a cold anger in his chest, not toward her, but toward those who did this. He had seen power used like that before. People crushed for telling the truth. Now it all made sense. Why she flinched at loud voices. Why she panicked when guards came. Why she never looked in mirrors. They hadn't just hunted her. They had broken her. "I believe you," Ethan said gently. Zira looked at him, surprised. "Why?" "Because your son still clings to you," he said. "Because you never left him behind. Because only a strong person runs from power to protect someone else." Zira lowered her head, and this time, a tear finally fell. Ethan gave her space. He didn't try to comfort her with words. He just sat beside her and waited. When she wiped her face, she looked stronger, not fully healed, but standing again inside. She took a deep breath and pointed to a strange mark on her wrist, a curved symbol burned into her skin. "This mean exile," she whispered. "Mark of shame." Ethan looked at the mark, then at her. To them, maybe, he said. But not to me. She blinked. He reached into his small locker and pulled out a band. It was leather, worn from his military days. He handed it to her. Cover it, he said, until you're ready to show it with pride. Zira took the band slowly. Her fingers shook. Then she tied it around the mark. For the first time, she smiled. It was small, and her lips barely moved, but it was real. Then, something else happened. Loki, still asleep, reached out with one little hand and grabbed Ethan's finger. Ethan froze. Zira gasped softly. Loki didn't wake, but he didn't let go either. Ethan looked at the boy's tiny hand wrapped around his. Something in that moment changed. They weren't just strangers anymore. They were becoming something more. The morning came quietly. Zira gently brushed Loki's hair as he ate soft fruit slices. The boy's face had color again. His small hands were no longer cold. Ethan smiled to himself as he watched them. Mother and child. Safe. For now. But peace doesn't last long on a broken world. Ethan had gone above ground to fetch supplies. The air outside was sharp. The sky above the colony was filled with dark clouds. Rain threatened. The streets were quiet. Too quiet. He passed by a wall and stopped. There it was, a new poster. Big. Red. Fresh. Wanted. Zira, traitor to the council. Extremely dangerous. Traveling with unregistered child. Report to local. Guard for reward. Ethan's heart dropped. They knew she was nearby. Someone had seen her. He grabbed supplies quickly and moved through the back alleys. He avoided the market, took a longer route, and slipped into his hidden door. Zira looked up as he rushed in. She saw the worry in his face. "What happened?" she asked, her voice low. Ethan showed her the poster. Her body went still, like ice, like she couldn't breathe. Loki looked up at his mother. "Mama?" he whispered. She pulled him close. Her hands trembled. "They know," Ethan said. "We have to be careful now." Zira nodded slowly. Her eyes filled with fear, but this time she didn't freeze. She stood. "We go?" Ethan shook his head. "No, they're watching the exits. You won't make it alone." She looked at him. "Then, what we do?" Ethan walked to a metal box and opened it. Inside were old weapons, small, simple, but human-made. He hadn't used them in years. He handed her a small energy blade. Zira stared at it, then slowly took it. She wasn't a soldier. She didn't want to fight, but she would protect her son. That night, the sounds came. Boots. 4 of them. Marching, heavy. Zira grabbed Loki and hid behind the crates as they'd practiced. Ethan stood near the door, his heart steady. Then, bang, bang, bang. "Open up," a voice shouted. "Security check." Ethan opened the door halfway. "Again? You were here 2 days ago." The alien guard stepped in, pushing past him. "We have a new report," one said. She was seen. A woman, pale skin, a child. Ethan stood tall. "You think I'm hiding people here?" One guard scanned the room. "No one trusts humans. Stranger, you have no friends on this colony." The second guard sniffed the air. "I smell something sweet like fruit." Ethan crossed his arms. "I eat too, you know." The guards looked around. Loki made a soft noise. Zira's hand went over his mouth, her eyes wide with fear. The guards turned toward the crates. Just as they stepped forward, Ethan knocked a metal pot off the table. It crashed to the ground. The guards spun around. Ethan laughed nervously. "Oops, sorry, slippery fingers." They scowled. "Stay inside," one of them warned. "If we find you helping a fugitive human, you'll be labeled one too." And with that, they left. Ethan shut the door. Zira crawled out from behind the crates, still clutching Loki. Ethan looked at her. "We can't stay here anymore," he said. "They're getting closer." Zira nodded. I know place. Hidden. Mountain cave. Old healer place. But far. Ethan grabbed a pack. Then we go before sunrise. By morning, they were gone. They moved through shadows, back streets, and tunnels. Ethan carried Loki when he got tired. Zira led the way, quiet but sure. But behind them, trouble followed. A small hover drone buzzed above. It zoomed through alleys, scanning. At a terminal nearby, a council officer looked at the new footage. There, he said, pointing at the screen. She has help, a human. Interesting. The officer smiled. Send the hunters. Back in the hills, Ethan and Zira climbed higher. Loki was asleep again, his small body wrapped on Ethan's back. Zira's steps were slower now. Her leg hurt. The old wound was bleeding again. But she didn't complain. Suddenly, Ethan stopped. He raised a hand. Listened. Then, wah! A ship overhead. Black, silent. Hunter class. Not military, but worse. Bounty hunters. Zira's face went white. They come, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Then we keep moving. They ran through the tall grass, into the rocks, up the mountain, trail. The sound of engines followed, and behind them, 3 dark figures landed, all armored, all silent, and all hunting one alien mother, her child, and the human who dared to care. The wind screamed between the rocks as Ethan pulled Zira behind a jagged cliff. Loki clung tightly to her back, fast asleep, unaware of the danger chasing them. Down the slope, dark figures moved like shadows. The bounty hunters, silent, fast, trained. They're close, Ethan whispered. He held his pulse blade tightly. We need to keep moving. Zira nodded, though her legs trembled. Her injured foot bled through the wrappings. Every step was pain, but she did not stop. Her son was still breathing. That was all that mattered. After a long climb, they reached a narrow opening between stone walls. Zira pointed. There, cave. They slipped through the crack into darkness. The cave was quiet. Dust filled the air, but it was dry and warm enough to rest. Strange glowing moss lit the walls with a faint blue light. Loki stirred, then settled again in his sleep. Ethan set down his pack. We'll stay here for now. Zira collapsed near the wall, exhausted. She looked around the cave and whispered, This was my home once. Ethan turned to her, surprised. You lived here? She nodded. Before they took it. This was a healer's place. My mother and grandmother and both worked here. We helped many people. Ethan looked at the faded carvings on the walls, symbols of medicine, peace, and protection. They turned you from a healer into a criminal. Zira closed her eyes. Yes, there was a silence between them. Deep, heavy. Then Ethan sat beside her. You don't have to tell me everything, but I want to understand. Zira took a slow breath. Her voice was soft but clear. I was not just a healer. I was daughter of a noble house. My family served the old empress. Ethan's eyes widened. She continued. But when Empress died, her brother took power. He was cruel. Many feared him. He wanted loyalty, not truth. Zira looked at her hands. One night my sister came to me, hurt. I treated her. She told me everything, how the new ruler had taken her by force. Ethan clenched his jaw. I spoke out, Zira said. I went to the council. I begged them to act, but they silenced me, called me a liar, a rebel. She lifted her sleeve and showed Ethan the burned mark again. They erased my name, took my daughter, banished me. I fled with Loki. He was just a baby. Ethan felt his chest tighten. You did the right thing, and they destroyed your life for it. Zira shook her head. Not destroyed, just buried. She touched the wall, where a broken symbol of a healer's hand was carved. I return now, not to heal others, but to save what's left of my family. Ethan stood and looked toward the mouth of the cave. Outside, clouds rolled in, hiding the stars. "We'll protect Loki together," he said. Zira looked at him, her eyes shining with quiet strength. "You're not just a stranger anymore," she whispered. "You're part of our path now." Suddenly, a noise echoed from outside. Zira grabbed Loki and pulled him close. Ethan moved to the entrance, crouching low. 3 red lights moved across the hills. The bounty hunters had found them. "They'll search every cave," Ethan said. "We don't have much time." Zira looked around, then motioned to a section of the wall. "There's a door." She pressed her hand against a rock. It glowed briefly, then slid open. Behind it, another chamber. Small. Hidden. Forgotten. "This was our emergency shelter," she said. "No one knows of it." They moved quickly, slipping inside just before a red beam passed by the entrance. Zira placed her hand again. The stone door closed quietly behind them. Darkness. Ethan lit a small lamp. Inside, the room was filled with old supplies: blankets, dried herbs, medical scrolls. Loki stirred and opened his eyes. "Mama." She kissed his forehead. "We're safe." The boy turned and looked at Ethan. "Ethan." The human smiled. "Hey, little guy." Loki reached into Ethan's hand and gave him a small carved stone. Ethan looked down. It was the same healer symbol from the cave walls. Zira's eyes softened. "That was my father's. He wore it always." Ethan closed his fingers around it. "Then I'll carry it now," he said. "Until this is over." Outside, thunder rolled. The hunters were still close. But deep in the mountain, among ancient stone and soft blue light, 3 souls rested, ready for what would come next. And in the stillness, Zira whispered words she hadn't spoken in years. "My name was never shame." A bright light flashed through the cave cracks. Zira held Loki close, her heart pounding. Outside, the bounty hunters had begun their search in full force. Searchlights swept over the rocks. Drones buzzed above. The mountain was no longer safe. Ethan stood at the sealed stone door. His weapon was ready. His jaw was tight. He hadn't slept. He listened to every sound, every footstep outside. Zira sat on the cold ground, watching him. She could see the storm in his eyes. "You know they won't stop," she whispered. "I know," Ethan replied. "But I'm not letting them take your son, or you." She looked down at Loki, who was curled against her chest. He didn't understand what was happening, but he could feel it. The tension, the fear. He stayed quiet, holding tightly to his mother's scarf. Ethan turned to Zira. "We can't stay in this cave. They'll break through." She nodded. "There's a path, old skylift, hidden behind waterfall." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Skylift? Ancient transport. Used to bring herbs down from the peak. It might still work, if we fix it." Ethan grabbed his tools. "Then let's pray it does." They waited for the drones to pass. Then, just before dawn, they slipped out of the hidden chamber and moved fast, through tight rock paths, over mossy stones, and finally toward the sound of rushing water. There it was, a giant waterfall crashing. Down the cliffside, behind it, barely visible, was a metal door covered in vines and rust. Zira pressed her palm against the panel. Nothing happened. "Dead," she said. Ethan pulled a screwdriver from his pack. "Let me try." He opened the side panel, sparks flying. The controls were old, wires were broken, dust covered the circuits. But this wasn't Ethan's first time fixing dead tech. He worked fast. Zira kept watch, holding her son close. Then, click. The lights blinked. The door creaked open. Behind it, an old lift platform sat on rusted rails. "Will it hold us?" Zira asked. "It better," Ethan said. They stepped inside. The door closed behind them. The lift groaned to life, slowly rising toward the top of the mountain. But before they could even breathe, boom. The cliff behind them exploded. Zira screamed, shielding Loki. A bounty hunter ship had fired a missile. The lift shook violently. "They found us," Ethan shouted. He pulled a lever, forcing the lift to go faster. Sparks flew from the old machinery. The rails groaned under the weight. Another explosion. Closer this time. The lift was halfway up the mountain. Ethan grabbed his blaster, aimed back through the shattered lift door, and fired at the approaching ship. Pew! Pew! The shots hit the ship's side, but it wasn't enough. Zira crawled to the controls and hit every emergency button she could find. One of them lit up. Above them, hidden doors opened, revealing a hidden cave near the peak. "The old Sky Temple," she said. "It's our only chance." Ethan aimed again. "Get Loki ready to jump." "What?" "We won't reach the top before they hit us. We need to jump into the cave, now." Zira looked over the side. It was a steep drop, but just below was the cave ledge. Ethan handed her a rope. "Tie him to your chest, hold tight." She nodded quickly. She kissed Loki's forehead. "Close your eyes, my love." Then, just as another missile flew toward them, they jumped. Zira landed, hard rolling into the cave entrance, cradling her son. Ethan followed right after, crashing onto the stone floor with a groan. The lift exploded behind them, fire lighting the sky. They had made it, barely. Inside the Sky Temple, it was quiet. Blue fire-lit torches lined the walls. Ancient carvings glowed faintly. Zira slowly stood up, brushing dirt from her son's face. He was scared, but safe. Ethan limped over to a large stone door and pulled it open. Inside, a wide hall stretched into the mountain, and in the center, an old beacon shaped like a flame. Zira gasped. "The Fire of Names." Ethan looked confused. "What is it?" "It holds the truth," she said. "Stories carved in light. If I speak here, the galaxy can hear." Ethan stared at the beacon. "Then you can tell your story. Show the truth." She nodded, stepping forward. Zira stood before the beacon, and for the first time in years, she raised her voice without fear. "I am Zira of the Healer's Line. I was exiled for protecting truth. My people must know I am not the enemy." The beacon glowed. Holograms lit the chamber, images of her past, the pain, the crime, the betrayal, and her innocence. Ethan watched in silence. This was no longer just survival, it was justice. Outside, the bounty hunters regrouped, but the skies above began to fill with signals. The beacon's message was spreading. Across ships, across stations, across worlds. Zira's truth had taken flight. And behind the firelight, Ethan whispered, "They came to kill you with fire, but you lit your own." The flames from the beacon still glowed, dancing in soft gold light. Zira stood tall in the heart of the Sky Temple, her voice echoing through ancient stone. The truth had been released. Her story now traveled through stars, across satellites into colonies and distant worlds. And far beyond the mountain, change had already begun. In the capital chambers of her home planet, the Royal Council gathered, in confusion. Holograms filled the air with Zira's voice, her scars, her exile, her bravery. The Empress's brother, the false ruler, stood frozen in his throne, his face pale. "What is this?" he barked. "Shut it down." But the truth had spread too far, too fast, and the people were listening. Back in the Sky Temple, Ethan checked his weapon. Loki sat near the fire, eating warm food. His cheeks were round again, his eyes brighter. He looked at Ethan and smiled shyly. "Ethan, hero?" he asked. Ethan chuckled. "No, buddy. Just a man trying to help." Zira turned toward him, her face calm, but something in her eyes had changed. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer silent. "I have to return," she said. Ethan raised his head. "Return? You mean go back to your world?" She nodded. "They must see me in person. I must stand before them, not as a prisoner, but as truth." Ethan looked uncertain. "They may still try to kill you." "Maybe," she said, "but I will not run anymore." He stared at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Then I'm going with you. Zira blinked. Why? Because you didn't give up, Ethan said. And because your son gave me this. He held up the healer's stone. That makes me part of your fight now. She smiled softly. Then we walked together. 3 days later, they reached a small resistance outpost hidden beneath a frozen valley. The people there had seen the beacon. Some were old friends of Zira's family. Others were strangers who believed in justice. They welcomed her. They gave them new clothes, medicine, and transport. Loki laughed as he sat in the warm lap of an old healer woman. For the first time, he acted like a child again. Zira stood on the edge of the outpost watching the stars. Ethan joined her. Still? Sure you want to face them? Yes, she said. But I'm no longer alone. Ethan looked at the stars too. What will you do when this is over? Zira smiled. Heal. Rebuild. Teach. My people forgot who we were. I will remind them. He nodded. And Loki? He will grow up free, she said. Not as the son of a fugitive, but as the child of a survivor. 2 weeks later, Zira stood before the royal court. She wore robes of white, the healer's symbol shining on her chest. Behind her stood dozens, people who now believed in her. And beside her, always, stood Ethan. Loki held his hand tightly. The court was silent. The false ruler tried to speak, but the people stopped him. The truth had burned through every lie. Witnesses came forward. Records were uncovered. And finally, the exile mark on Zira's wrist was removed by the new empress's own hand. You are no longer forgotten, the empress said. You are Zira of the healers. Welcome home. Tears filled Zira's eyes. She looked at Ethan. He only smiled. You did this, he whispered. No, she replied. We did. That night, celebrations lit the skies. Zira danced with her people, her son laughing nearby. The sky was full of fireworks, colors bursting like the heartbeat of a new world. Ethan stood at the edge of the crowd, his coat dusty, his hands in his pockets. Zira found him. You're quiet, she said. I've never seen a world heal before, Ethan said with a small smile. It's beautiful. Zira took his hand. You helped light the fire, she said. Now, stay and feel its warmth. He looked at her, this strong, kind woman who had once sat forgotten in the cold, and nodded. He stayed. Months later, a new healer school opened on the same mountain where Zira had once hidden in fear. Children of all species came to learn. And in the front garden, a statue was raised of a woman holding her child, with a human standing beside her holding out his hand. The plaque read, They ignored her cries. But one brave human answered. And in that new world, where hope had once died, a new beginning was born. Together,